welcome to another episode of Skin Hue, a monthly YouTube series where we get together to talk about elevating our overall skin health and wellness while demystifying the healthcare system. Dr. Michelle Henry is a board-certified dermatologist, a dermatological surgeon, and she has also co-authored numerous articles and chapters in leading textbooks on aesthetic treatment for skin of color, hair restoration, and even skin cancer treatments and surgery. In our conversation today, Dr. Henry shares with us why representation matters, why clinical diversity within the beauty industry is so important to patients, customers, clinicians, and even skincare brands. So let's hop to it. Hello, Dr. Henry. Welcome to our newest episode of Skin Hue.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I definitely wanted to have you on the show. I've been following you for quite some time, and I just really think our audience will learn so much from you. But before we get into a deeper dive of different topics, I would really love to hear about your background, how you came to dermatology, because you've built such a successful practice and you're a sought after expert. So please share more about us.
Yes, for sure. So hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Michelle Henry. I'm a dermatologist based in Manhattan, New York. I'm the founder of Skin and Aesthetic Surgery of Manhattan, and I teach at Weill Cornell Medical School. And I also have the Henry Research Group, where we do research to really help to reduce or encourage representation of minorities in clinical studies, so that we aren't retrofitting medications and treatments to patients of color. But I did not always know that I was going to be a dermatologist. I probably always knew I was going to be a physician since I was about probably 6 or 7. But I did not know I was going to be a dermatologist. I thought I would be a breast cancer surgeon. I had a great aunt very close to me who passed of breast cancer. And as a very young child, we decided that was my course. And then I got to medical school and realized that oncology wasn't for me. I'm very much an empath. It was very tough for me. And I'm also quite technical. So I really enjoy the technical side of dermatology. So my very first mentor was a Mohs surgeon, which is a skin cancer surgeon. I love the fact that I could cure cancer. I could reconstruct the patient after cutting out the cancer. And I could, kind of use all of those skills together. And she told me that that was a subset of dermatology. My second rotation was dermatology, and I absolutely fell in love. Dermatology is really all things in medicine. It's infectious disease, it's immunology, it's primary care in some ways, it's rheumatology. And so if you love medicine, you will love dermatology. It's technical, it's aesthetic. And so dermatologists have really long careers because of that. And so, once I decided I was on the dermatology path, and I've really never looked back.
Yeah, I love to hear how you brought out that dermatology is more than just what we think about, treating skin. It's so much about the whole person. And then also you talked about clinical research. And
Yes,
that's a topic I really wanted to focus on today, because I don't think we truly understand what clinical research is. So the first question I have is just start very basic. Like, what is clinical research? What are clinical trials? And then maybe you can add on that with how the dermatologists factor into that entire process.
Yeah, so whenever a drug is brought to market, something that is classified as an actual drug with like biologic activity, it has to be cleared by the FDA. And so there's a clinical trials process with multiple stages. The first stage is to determine, like, is this safe? Is it safe? Is it efficacious? Is it better than the standard? So those are kind of the stages of a clinical trial. First you come up with your concept and your proof of concept. Then you see if this is a safe drug in a human model. And then you see if this is an efficacious drug. Is it safe? Does it actually work? Is it better than the competitors? What is its advantage? Then you do kind of post-marketing things as well. Historically, Black patients have been underrepresented in a lot of these trials. for good reason. There's a long history of abuse of Black patients in medicine. And so a lot of patients have reservations in joining these trials. But what happens when that does happen is that we're not a part of the trials, but we are the people who need the medications. And so oftentimes these medications are coming to market without being appropriately tested on a wide, diverse range of people. And we're unfortunately figuring out what should have been found in a trial after these drugs come to market. So what's important is creating relationships with patients and having principal investigators. So I do a lot of pushing for principal investigators of color because that trust is more likely to be there, especially when you're working with a principal investigator who has the appropriate cultural competency to understand you, to understand your fears, and to give a patient that peace of mind. So I tell my patients, there is not a dollar in the world anyone could pay me to harm them. My goal here is to fight for my patients, to protect them, to protect all the patients to protect all patients in general. But of course, I'm also worried about patients that are marginalized, and part of marginalized groups are Black and brown patients, So my patients trust that if I felt that a trial was not safe, I would not use it for them, and I would not expose them to something that was not of potential benefit to them, right? And that's really important. So I talk to a lot of groups about pushing for dermatologists that are of color or we need wide representation so that everyone can see themselves and feel encouraged, because the outcomes are really poor when we don't have good representation. And now the FDA is pushing that a lot of these trials have to have a certain percentage of folks of color, because this is dangerous, not only in hypertensive medications and, medications for, a wide range of immunologic disorders, but also for aesthetics. We have these lasers that they've never been tested on brown skin. And what happens when people are playing around with them in their offices after they've been approved on brown skin? We really want to make sure that we have proper protocols so that every patient can feel safe going into any physician's office. And that's when we really are going to get more equality in medicine.
Right. So what about over-the-counter products? Are there trials that brands do? Do they follow the same type of process, but maybe just a little bit different?
So yeah, it's significantly different. It's not as stringent.
Mm-hmm.
If a brand is doing their own study, and although I'm sure many brands do really great studies on their own, there's always the potential for inherent bias when you believe in your product. And so when we grade evidence, we have different levels of evidence, and the best evidence is going to be, a multi-center, randomized, double-blinded kind of study, because the more people you have, the more blinded it is, the more investigators you have, the more opportunities you have to reduce bias, right? Even very well-intentioned people have bias. And so inherent to any study is going to be some bias, but we try to reduce that bias by, you can't align. It's going to be very difficult to align 100 centers and, with so many investigators that are also blinded. So the larger the trial, the more statistically significant it is, the more centers, the more randomization you have, the less biased it is, and the more meaningful the data is. And that's hard for an independent study of a brand to do on their own. While I work with a lot of brands, especially in the skincare space, that will do that. And I think it's fantastic because they do not have to. They're not classified as drugs, so they can come to market and make whatever claims they want. And it's up to us to try to be savvy enough to decide, like, does this make sense or not? But I do applaud brands that try to bring a level of science to what they do, but because it does give us something that they try to really stand behind their claims with some integrity. I really appreciate that because they really don't have to.
Yeah, that is definitely a positive. That builds trust, right? That puts me in a position as a consumer, as a patient, that I'm a lot more likely to use that brand. But speaking of brands, how does this differ from dermatologist tested versus a clinical trial? Because I think sometimes some people, get those mixed up, saying like, oh, this is dermatology tested, it was in a trial, that's what that means. But I can assume that's not the case.
Yeah, it's very different. There's a website I hope I'm not quoting it wrong, but I believe it's just clinicaltrials.gov. And you can look at any, like, you can search for any proper clinical trial. Most over-the-counter things are not going through clinical trials. Now, maybe if they were once categorized as a drug and then they were then prescription, and many things can get then transitioned to over-the-counter, like adapalene or so many other drugs that once upon a time were prescription and are no longer. Those may have proper clinical trials, but usually you don't see really robust, proper clinical trials for things in the over-the-counter beauty space.
Yeah.
Now, they may call it a clinical trial because it's their own independent clinical trial, but those are the kind of things you want to think about. Is this a small independent trial that was initiated by the company? Is this a proper trial that went through the FDA? So that's really important. And dermatologist tested means exactly what the language says: tested and approved. It doesn't mean that it went through a full study. So, for instance, I'm on the validation board for L'Oreal. So I try their products. I look at the formulation. I give feedback on if I think the formulation is good. I give feedback on how the experience and how it smells and the marketing, and if how this is going to feel for all patients. Are there any blind spots that the company is having about the marketing and or the product? Are they missing a mark? So these things so I help to validate. So because I have tried the product and validated the product, is a dermatologist tested? And then other dermatologist tested does also mean if you're in a trial. So it's language that can mean lots of things, but more often than not, it does mean that maybe there's some sort of validation board with multiple or maybe one dermatologist. But that's typically what it means if someone's using that label with a level of integrity.
Right. I think that's going to be really helpful. And you also just talked about marketing. So one of my other questions I had was, how does marketing impact whether a patient believes that particular prescription or drug is for them, or maybe it doesn't?
Yeah. I mean, marketing is really powerful. Marketing is powerful in the over-the-counter market. It's in the pharma market. I mean, in many ways, marketing, advertising makes our world go around, right? And the reason that these companies are willing to spend so much money for marketing is because it is what tells their consumer to buy. It tells their consumer if you are who we are targeting. There's so many numbers that are crunched and demographic studies that are done when people create their marketing, because it tells consumers exactly what is meant for them. Everything from the actors that are used, to the tone of voice, to the setting that they're placed in, to the colors used in the ad, everything has been studied, and it is a very precise science. Marketing and advertising, well, that's more advertising, but marketing as a whole, right, which is larger than just advertising, is also a very precise science. So that's the language, those are the outlets, it's all the tools that we use to build your idea around the brand. Or the product, it's all a very precise science. So it's critical. And, when brands are deciding to target a certain demographic, oftentimes the ads are different for different markets. It's probably not as transparent in the 90s. I know we always joke about how they'd have the same ad in ebony, and then they just use different people with a different color and put it in Cosmo with the exact. So they're not that transparent anymore. And they understand that people are far more complex than just seeing people who look like them, although that is a part of it. But yeah, marketing is very, very important. And that's why the FDA regulates how pharmaceutical drugs market very closely. So people always laugh when they look at commercials and it's like, and this drug will do and kill you, right? And those things are scary, but I think it is an attempt to make sure that companies can't hide from all of the potential risks. Now, when we say it may kill you, it may push people away from a drug, that the risk of that happening is so low that it's not even significant. But I think it's an attempt that understands the power of how we market and how we advertise, and how susceptible people can be to marketing attempts and advertising attempts.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as we wrap up our conversation, I always like to leave the women who are listening with one solid tip that they can take away. So in terms of drugs and what we talked about today, if someone is on a drug, what should they do? How should they express that to their clinician?
So if they are on a drug,
If
what
they
do you
are on
mean?
a drug and there's issues, you know, and there's some type of adverse reaction maybe, and they're not
Yeah,
really quite sure if it is, you know, sometimes we wait a little bit longer than we actually should to see
yeah.
a clinician. So just any, you know, words
I
of thought.
Yeah, I think that we should all I think that that is harming people. You know, some people say proudly, I don't like doctors, I don't go into the doctor. And to me sometimes it feels like I don't like myself, right? Because what we're saying is like it's about finding the right doctor, right? And understanding that doctors aren't a monolith. So if you don't like doctors, then maybe you didn't like that doctor, right? But you deserve to find someone who resonates with you, who you feel safe with, who you can ask these questions, you know? I would never, and this might be a far-fetched parallel, and it is the end of my day, so I might not be as sharp as I typically am, but I'm never going to fly my own plane because like I don't trust pilots, or there's a reason people have training. There's a reason we go to school for 15 years. And it's not to just tell people we're wrong, right? Tell people they're wrong, or to tell people that we know more than you. It's to help guide you, and in every profession, the reason that people become experts is because you we want to lean on you for your judgment. You're in a different profession than me, so I am guaranteed certain that there are things like the back of your hand that I know nothing about, right? And if I'm coming for your counsel, I'm leaning on your expertise, and I'm not bringing ego to that, because anybody who understands the importance of expertise understands you can't be an expert in everything, right?
Right.
And although you know yourself, you can't be an expert in everything, and so you owe it to yourself to have that conversation. And just because you don't like that doctor doesn't mean there's not someone. I meet doctors that I can't stand, and I am a doctor, right? Not everyone is for everyone, and not everyone has the best of intentions. But sometimes we're creating this society where everyone believes that everyone has poor intentions. And what I see in our community is we end up hurting ourselves. I'll have patients that will try everything and do all of these things before they come to me, and it breaks my heart, because they've developed through either family or friends or culture or fear, right? The fear around coming to the doctor, that they believe that, I had some patients tell me that if I come to the doctor, they're going to force me to take the vaccine. I believe you should, right? But no one can force you to do anything, right? And so there's so many misconceptions about what you can do. You still have your power when you're in a doctor's office. You're coming to a doctor's office for counsel, for guidance, but you still get to make your own decisions, right? And so I think it's important that people seek that out and not be afraid. People can't force you to do things, but you owe it to yourself to try to have the best advice to make good decisions. And I didn't answer your question, but the next part of that is that's just something that I really believe in, because I
Yeah.
care for so many patients of color who come in with really end stage of disease. They've lost most of their hair. Their lupus has gone so far because they're looking at misinformation, and they're afraid, and they think every doctor is the same and no one's going to listen to them. And they should have agency and know that they can get a million second opinions, of course, within reason for your budget, but don't be afraid to seek that out. And if it's a medication, speak up. I tell my patients, the minute you feel something is wrong, unless it's a life-threatening disorder, and which fortunately for dermatology there aren't a lot. If you think you're having a side effect, you stop it and you call me, right?
Right.
I would rather you talk to me than live with the anxiety of what this is going on. If you feel something different in your body, talk to me. And there are a lot of things that are just anxiety, and we walk you through it. But never be afraid to ask, and by all means, don't continue taking the medication that you feel like makes you feel weird. Talk to somebody, because you do know your body, and if you're noticing symptoms, you're going to notice that. We're not going to notice that. We have to go on your word and what you're feeling. So trust yourself. And if it is anxiety, trust that we will have that conversation with you as well. So I think the biggest thing is don't be afraid to communicate. Don't feel like when you come to the doctor, you don't have decisions. At the end of the day, you walk out, you decide if you're going to take the medication, if you're not. But I would encourage everyone to have an open mind, and try to, do a risk benefit analysis to really keep themselves safe.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice, and the perfect way to end this conversation to say, trust yourself, trust your decisions, and really look for the right clinician, dermatologist, primary care physician, whomever it may be, that can be a part of your care team and your partner in helping you manage your health. At the end
Yeah,
of the day, you're looking
I,
for a partner.
Yeah, I don't want to cut you off, but that's such an important word, as partner. I have so many patients who will come in and they're intimidated and they're afraid and they're not speaking up and they're just yesing me. And I stop them and I say, don't yes me. Ask me your real questions. Tell me how you feel. And yes, in any situation when you feel like you're not the expert, you feel like it may be intimidating, but it's about your health. It should not. Don't let someone intimidate you, whoever it is. Speak up. It's your moment. It's your time. You've come to get care, and we are partners in your care. You're not. It's not a. We're not. I don't know, wardens. This is a partnership. We're not in control of everything. We are there to give our guidance and our counsel. And so, speak up, don't be afraid, don't be intimidated. And it doesn't matter if you don't have all the words. It doesn't matter if you don't have the technology. It doesn't matter the terminology rather. It doesn't matter if you don't know the right word for whatever, describe it, communicate however you can. And it is our job to try to understand that, right? So don't feel intimidated. We don't expect you to perform as doctors. We don't expect you to perform as someone who knows anything about science. So don't feel like you're being judged. Just use the language that you have to express what you feel. And it is our job to try to figure that out.
Absolutely. I think that's the perfect way to end our conversation. And again, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I want to walk away feeling like I can be an advocate and find the right partner for me. So again, thank you so much. And I look forward to maybe having a more longer term conversation, because I feel like there's so much we could talk about and unpack.
Of course, I would love to. Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this. It's so important. And hopefully I will talk to you again soon.
Absolutely.